Hello and welcome to the Sobet Punks podcast. This is episode 90. That's the big 9-0.
The big 9-0.
I'm Dave.
And I'm Siobhan.
And this is the podcast in which two punks talk about meaning, transcendence, awe, and spirituality with a small s.
Would you consider yourself a punk?
Oh, well.
Just addressing us like that. I'm now like, am I a punk? I don't know. I don't know if people would.
I don't know that I necessarily consider myself anything. No, I don't.
Okay.
What's that?
Labels don't define me, dude.
Yeah, no, exactly that. That's quite an existential question.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to.
I think
just something struck me when you were like, "We're just two punks." I was like, "Oh, are we?" I think we might be.
I think that punk
more boring than that.
is probably the thing that shaped my life more than anything else. Would you consider yourself a Buddhist?
I was going to say I'm probably more a punk than I am a Buddhist, and yet I meditate every day, and I definitely don't embody
punk every day.
There are some days that my day could easily be described as not very punk, i.e. today I went to the gym, now I'm recording a podcast about spirituality, and then I'm going to go get my hair cut in some expensive manner. It just doesn't feel very punk. Punk would be like, I don't know, stay at home, listen to music and cut your own hair.
I don't know. Anyway, let's just gloss over it.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Yeah, I probably would. I probably would consider myself a punk.
You're an old punk now.
Fuck off. So this is episode 90.
90.
Which is a hell of a lot of podcasts to have done. In 10 episodes' time, we will be 100 years old. Episodes old.
I never thought I'd be 100 years old. Episodes old.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to come up with some sort of a special celebration for our 100th episode.
Is it a centurion celebration? Would that be right?
I suppose so. But I think if we just dress as centurions, it won't come across on the radio.
Or centaurs. Isn't that half human, half horse?
Fuck knows, yeah.
I think it makes for great radio.
Yeah, okay. All right. So in 10 episodes' time, expect us to be centaurs.
I'm sure we will be.
Yeah.
I believe
yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll do an episode about deciding what that episode should be about, and it can be like all modern day documentaries.
Like, are you ready? And it'll just be terrible.
Yeah. There you go. Anyway, we need to trudge through the Eightfold Path first.
Indeed.
We are 3 episodes in to this continuing series. And
we made a series.
Yeah, of sorts. Sort of. Probably when we listen back to them all together, we'll realise that we've just said the same thing for every single one.
Well...
Is that the Buddha's fault? That's what you're about to say, isn't
the
it?
Eightfold Path is a bit like that. It is a big intermeshed mash, so it's not our fault that it's repetitive. But, we'll see how it all goes.
So, that will be right action, but we will get to that in a little while.
Ooh.
After, first of all, doing what we always do, which is to start this episode of the podcast. I've turned into William Shatner.
No.
In saying one thing that we've done in the last 2 weeks, which has created a sense of transcendence or spirituality, and the other one meaning.
Yeah, I think that was all. That's the 4, isn't it? The big 4.
What have you done, Siobhan?
So I'm going to go with meaning probably, and a bit of awe. I don't think this is going to be everyone's version of meaning or awe, but when I think about the last 2 weeks, this is definitely the thing that I'm like, oh gosh, no, that was really, really nice, and it meant a lot to me. We had an in-house competition at our gym, which ran over 3 weeks, and in the past when this has been done, it's been like organised by a separate entity. So we're a CrossFit gym, and there's this thing called the CrossFit Open every year. You pay CrossFit some money, you do these workouts, you go on a worldwide leaderboard. And a lot of people didn't do it this year for various reasons. And a lot of people often don't do it because it feels like a weird amount of pressure to put on yourself for no reason. So what we did was we did an in-house one, but we split off into teams. So the whole gym who entered split up into 4 teams. We had a colour each, and you came dressed in your colour. It's very primary school-esque in that respect. But
really? That surprises me.
Shut up. Dave's had to come to my gym this week.
We'll get there.
But the nice thing about that is people who didn't know each other got to connect. People who you just do this supportive thing that you don't necessarily get the opportunity to do anyway. In CrossFit classes, it's generally quite supportive and everyone cheers each other on anyway. But there's something about a continued 3-week thing that doesn't really matter, but it only matters as much as you want to make it matter. And everyone got on board and everyone felt really friendly and competitive for 3 weeks.
Are those two things not a bit mutually exclusive?
No, it was nice because it was a bit tribal in as much as it's, the greens against the pinks, against the orange, against the blues.
Fuck you, greens!
No, green was my team!
Oh, okay, fuck you, pinks!
Fuck you, pinks,
right.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And each week there was a leaderboard that they totted up so you could get behind it every week and get a bit more competitive, but in a very friendly, fun way. And it was. And we had a little award at the end and a little drink afterwards. And just the amount of people that joined in. I've done CrossFit for loads of years now, and I do the Open every year and see the take up on that. And those who get involved like it, but it's not very... You don't really feel very connected to the other people. It's very individual. And so this was the first time that I've just seen 100 people basically did it all together. And it was just really nice to have such a lot of people doing the same thing, really backing each other. And just people who wouldn't normally, there's classes of people that I don't see. Classes being the time of day they go, not like...
it's not a caste system.
It's not a caste system at CrossFit. That'd be horrific. But it was just really...
I didn't know the pinks were so downtrodden.
Well, no, they're actually hoity-toity. But anyway, in the end, the greens were victorious, which was wonderful, and beat the pinks.
Right, okay, so I understand. Why didn't you just skip to the end, Siobhan?
No, that's not the reason it was meaningful.
The reason it was meaningful was because I fucking won.
But it was very nice, and it was so silly. I knew it'd be fun because I've done like a competition in this kind of style before at a gym previous, but I don't really have much more to say on it. It's very basic, and I felt like I was reaching at the beginning of discussing this, but it truly was a really fun 3 weeks, and that last week ended with people having to lift extraordinarily heavy weights, and a lot of people lifted heavier than they ever have, and not me. I did a fucking bad one. But it was just really nice, really supportive, really fun, and I think everyone just feels very connected in a way that they probably didn't before. Again, the 6 a.m. class don't see anyone. I go in the middle of the day and I don't see anyone in the evening. So it was just nice to everyone be in the same place.
So fundamentally, the sense of meaning, presumably, therefore, comes from community.
Yeah, community, putting an effort into something and putting an effort into a community. One thing our gym wasn't very good at, I would say, is everyone's very individual. Everyone's goes to their class and doesn't really bother with everyone else so much, which is a shame because CrossFit gyms generally aren't like that. But it's because we haven't done any of these like community all together things. So it was really nice to have this one and for it to have worked out so well. Now people are really excited to, sign up for things together or be social, which prior to that people just kind of stayed in their own lanes. So yeah, it was a nice sense of meaning through connection. I feel like I fall on connection a lot, but it's definitely something that I'm finding way more meaningful at this point in my life. And
well, it's something that's lacking from the culture in general, so it probably makes sense.
Yeah.
I did go to your gym a couple of times since the last episode was recorded for the first time ever. I went there once and there was nothing on. I think that was when you fucked your arm up or something and I had to go and get your bag.
Oh yeah, that was yeah.
I've never experienced it in action, and I believe I made a joke when I went and saw a man about my knees to get some exercises to try and strengthen my knees, and I arrived at the end of a class and I'd made a joke beforehand that I was going to open the car door and hear somebody saying "Go guys, yeah, great," and everybody cheer, and I pulled up. No, I didn't. I walked there the first time. The second time I pulled up and something different happened. But the first time I walked up, and as I came just into earshot, I heard somebody scream, 1, 2, 3, yeah! And everyone went, yeah! So I turned round and started to walk away and thought, no, I simply can't do this. Yeah. The music sounded a little bit like the Cha-Cha Slide, I would say. That song that was created to teach disabled children how to dance. And And then as I was walking up the driveway, suddenly all of these people in sports bras just started running at me because they were doing a little jog. So that was very intimidating. So more or less it ticked all of the boxes as to exactly what I expected.
Yeah.
I then said to you, one thing I didn't hear was anybody whoop. So I went back the second time, pulled the car up, opened the door. As the door opens, all I could hear was everyone go, woo, woo.
Probably me. It's good.
I could hear you.
Whooping's nice.
I could pick you out. It was everything that I feared. But good on you. I'm glad you got it in your life. It's so funny because I think it's nice for us. And we both have completely different versions of this, but respectfully to have like obviously things that are just our own. And the gym very much. The guy that I saw about my knees sort of made a joke about me joining CrossFit. And it's like, there is zero chance of that ever happening for a lot of different reasons. It is everything that I find awful in the world, and that's nothing. I'm not getting at anybody that does it, but I think it's very healthy for us to have things that are completely separate. And I'm fully aware of how dreadful you are when you're there, and it's nice that you get that outside of the house. The only problem happens when we bump into somebody from your CrossFit gym, and you have to sort of teeter on the edge of Shiv, as you're known in CrossFit, and Siobhan, the real person who is Siobhan.
But I am both people.
You are both people, which horrifies me.
Yeah, I know.
But that's fine. I think that's good. I think it's healthy.
I was saying that to Rob. I said, I might need to leave whilst Dave's doing his thing because Dave doesn't ever want to meet CrossFit Siobhan. But
again, it's not CrossFit Siobhan, is it? CrossFit Siobhan literally has a different name. I always, whenever anybody comes in and says, "Oh, you're Shiv's husband," I think, "Oh, right, I'm not going to like you very much." No, that's not true. I'm sure everyone's very nice, but everything you've just described sounds awful to me. I apart from the community aspect of it, which I think is lovely, but the competition side of it, I just don't get it. Competing, even for fun.
But it's this particular one. This is why the open thing isn't very fun, because you do it so individually. So it really is individually competitive, and that's not very fun. But the team thing is really fun because you're competing in order to get your it matters to you because it matters to your team. So you don't really care what you get as long as you do your best because you want your team to get the best score out of you so that they do well as a whole. So it's a different kind of competitive, and it's one that's far more compelling and people get behind. People don't want to do things on their own so much. That's why we have a very poor sign up rate for individual stuff at our gym. But this one, it was just like 4 times as much signed up, probably. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but it was definitely people who would never have bothered before, because just turning up and getting a score meant that their team was going to have more points, and so they bothered because they wanted the whole to do well. They wanted
points.
No, because you wanted your team to do well, and you did it for your team. So there's loads of workouts that came out and they were like, "I can't do that."
But of course, the team is made up of those individuals. So yeah, it's a bit of a circular argument. That,
but you wouldn't. People who wouldn't have done it for themselves but did it because.
Would you have liked to have lost?
I thought we had lost until we won.
That's not what I asked. Would you have liked to have lost?
No one likes to lose.
Why not? What's wrong with losing?
Nothing's wrong with losing.
You've still done all of the great things that you did.
It's great. Like, would you like to?
You would have still got whooped at.
I wouldn't mind. It's different. Yeah, any of those places is fine.
Did you want to win?
I wanted to beat the other team.
You're right. So, yes, you wanted to win. So therefore, you can blame it on the team. You can describe it as being that you're competing in a way that's like team building, which is how you've just done it. But actually, in reality, that's not at all what you're doing.
There was a show-off team.
You want to win.
And had they come 4th and we come 3rd, that would have been
You've
fine.
Just allocated that to them, though.
Team.
They were a show-off team.
They were a show-off team.
See, this is what sport does to you. It makes you it makes you tribal.
Yeah.
And you use cognitive dissonance to work out something bad about the other team so that you can just allocate them that.
They were show off.
Oh,
no, I get it. But it's nice. I don't know. I like it. I like it because I don't really do it in any other version of life. And it's quite funny to go and do that for a bit. How about you, Dave? Last 2 weeks, meaning, transcendence, or spirituality, any of the above in your life?
Well, I'm going to more or less ignore the question and just talk about something else. The reason being that I've actually had a few things this week that I could have talked about in this little segment, but actually both of them I think fundamentally will come up in the main bulk of the episode.
Okay.
Whether I'm shoehorning them in or not, I don't think so, but I might be. But they to me are something to do with right action. So I'm just going to talk about the Adam Curtis documentary series Shifty, which we watched and has very recently come out. And I thought might be an interesting thing to have a little discussion about, partly just to encourage anybody to watch it. We've talked about Adam Curtis documentaries on this podcast before. I think probably back in the Breakfast Punks days.
We definitely have quite a lot, actually. I think there was a period of time where we were obsessively watching them all.
And this is a brand new one, and it's very hard to say in a sort of quick and easy sentence or two what it was about, because as with all Adam Curtis documentaries, it's kind of about everything.
Yeah.
But this one did have a really clear through line, which was more or less tracking largely the Thatcher government and the changes that were made during that period of time of the sort of very late 70s and through the 80s, which although it didn't really ever explicitly say this, but fundamentally it was setting up the fact that these are the things that have led us to kind of where we are now. And it did go through to the Tony Blair a little bit, but it was mostly about Thatcher.
Yeah.
But having said that, it was also just about that time and place. So as with, if you've never seen an Adam Curtis documentary, these ones are slightly different. We'll get to that. But he finds loads of footage. Often it's like B-roll footage from old news outtakes and things. And pieces stories together using it, and he's very clever. I mean, I would say, I think this is. I have a sense of awe as to just how amazingly talented he is at doing this one specific thing that he does so well. He sort of fits together. So whilst this was telling a narrative of sorts of Thatcher government, it was also just generally talking about the time and place and capturing certain things. Sometimes some of which just seemed slightly obscure. You know, a dog who was about to have a sex change and was clearly very worried about it with his big eyes.
Oh, Bruno.
Called Bruno. You know, just random things that are sometimes, you know, it's sort of quirky, sometimes not, I wouldn't say funny necessarily, although there's definitely some humour in it.
He does a clever, like, laying something out without saying it. I mean, he doesn't actually say anything in this, but he just that kind of, you can draw your own conclusions, and he hasn't really stated it. He's just kind of, it's clever because it's like a montage or like a mosaic of ideas, and you know, he's like this and this, and you're like, gosh, that's what he means, and fucking going, is that what I mean? You make your own decisions. Yeah,
although I think as time has gone on, he's got more and more overt. I think his early series were very nuanced and very much just like, here's some ideas, here's a load of stuff that's vaguely about this subject. And they all told a narrative for sure, and they had a point of view for sure as well, but they were much, now I feel like the last few, I think that the last proper thing that he did a while ago, he's done two things since actually, but the last thing, which was called Can't Get You Out of My Head, was probably one of the most astounding pieces of work I've ever seen. I mean, it's just weaves together so many different narratives, and it's so extraordinary. So I don't mean to say that I was going to say, I don't mean to say he's got worse. He definitely hasn't got worse at anything. That's not even the context of what I'm trying to say. But I think he's got a little bit more direct. There's been a few series that have finished with a kind of question of like, this is what the bankers have done. Are we going to allow it? I think there was literally one that sort of finished with that. And so, whereas the early series had none of that kind of directness at all, it was very, very much just like, here's a bunch of stuff, which I prefer personally, but so this series, we've both been looking forward to it for a long time. He tends to turn these things out once every 3-ish years, 3-4 years probably. He'd done one a little while ago that was about Russia, which was made in the same way as this one was. So in his previous ones, there's always a voiceover, which is him giving the narrative a little bit. In the last two series that he's done, there's no narrative at all. So you just sort of watch it, and it's quite hypnotic, and it kind of just unravels itself. And that, again, is so awe-inspiring. I mean, it's incredible that you can even get the vaguest of story from just a bunch of stuff that's just been chucked together. And that's so, I mean, really, like, absolutely pure talent.
And nothing that was purposefully filmed for this. It's all archive footage.
Mm.
So it truly is. It's not like he's like, I'm going to film this particular person talking to this particular person. They'll be prepping. Like, these people don't know they're in this documentary probably. Like, it's taking someone else's story and somehow using it to tell a story of your own.
Like Bruno the dog who's about to get his nuts cut off.
Especially that Russian one, because it's all, Cold War footage.
Yeah. Or again, it's like outtakes of Cold War footage.
Yeah, and it's just piecing that together to tell another story. It's incredible that he can do that. And so time consuming to go through all that archive. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Right.
And he gets to put these things out through the BBC. I think from what I can make out, I heard an interview with him once, and I think they just let him. He doesn't cost very much. He just gets left in his little room and he just turns these things out every now and again. I don't think they show them on the actual telly anymore. I think they all just go straight to whatever it is, iPlayer.
Yeah.
But they're all available on YouTube too. So if you're like us and you don't have a iPlayer, then you can watch them anyway. But I felt a lot of different ways about this, and I think I'm gonna have to go back and revisit it at some point. I think a lot of my critiques, if that's even the right word, are kind of the same reasons as I would actually herald it as brilliant. I mean, I think it's brilliant that he's removed himself from it entirely. Because whilst I'm not suggesting that he's necessarily making comment on this, as we've discussed many times, documentaries are being made where increasingly the director is becoming like the star of every documentary. It's always about somebody making a film. This, he's removed himself. I'm not saying he's done this deliberately because I think this. I'm just saying that I've critiqued a lot of documentaries for that reason, and so I want to say this is completely the opposite of that.
It's so true. Like, he's got a very specific voice, and I mean that in both literally the sound of his voice and the way in which he delivers his information. And I think prior to him being so well known, you'd have said that it's the perfect non-voice. Like, it's so non-emotional, so very, you would say, unbiased, a perfect documentary voice. But yeah, you're right. Once you get used to an Adam Curtis documentary, you get used to his delivery, and so to remove it is quite stark. And it's even he, who was being quite beige and quite non-biased, can still be so recognizable and be a part of it. So to remove it feels a bit like, at first I was like, oh no, is it just going to all be not subtitles, but like captioned? But then you very quickly get used to it, and it does become a good, like you say, he's removed the director from it. Yeah,
which I think is brilliant. And I think that ultimately, though, having said that, it's probably, of all of the things he's made, it's probably the one that has the clearest opinion. And it's an opinion which he's, I mean, specifically the opinion is an anti-Thatcher one, and that more or less Thatcher's government over the course of those 10 years kind of ruined the like Britain, but in the past he's made them where that includes America, and there's obviously America's having a similar thing at the same time, and so it's kind of in that context it's the whole of the Western world, I suppose, in the past. I feel a little bit like the story that he told in this he's told before, and this is definitely more in depth and it's told in a different way, but ultimately I think I walked away from it, it's so fucking depressing. And,
it's not a nice watch.
And this is where like the nuance comes in, because I have two different opinions about this. Ultimately, my gut feeling was, why on earth has he made this now? Like, society doesn't need this. I don't really know what society needs, and I'm not suggesting that this is going to have any standing on the total of society, but as somebody making art, it's like you've got a choice as to what you're going to do. Why on earth would you choose to make this now? Well, of course, the reason he's chosen to make this now is because it very much speaks of now. So what he's done is very clever. He's gone back in time and he's told a story of something which is very, very much talking about where we are right this second in time. But maybe I've turned into a hippie since the last time I've watched Adam Curtis documentaries or something. But I was just like, why didn't you choose to make something more positive? Or like find anything else to make it. You've told this story already, so it feels a little bit like you're beating a dead horse, and literally. He does beat a dead horse halfway through, or at the end. Well, he didn't, but he shows a dead horse at the end, which is a metaphor which strikes you around the head with all of its force. But I suppose I was just, I don't know what I was hoping for. I don't think I was hoping for anything. And again, I take my hat off to it because it was an incredible documentary and it was so well made. But it just felt the whole time like you're just adding to the problem that we've got. Everybody already thinks that the country has fallen apart, and that's one of the many things which is causing our society to fall apart. Why have you made another thing which just says, look, guys, look how shit everything is, and look how shit everybody was, and look how shit politics is, look how shit politicians are. Those things may well all be true, but do we need that now?
I think...
do we need to be hit around the head anymore with how shit everything is? Or do we need people to make things of this merit which actually look towards something more positive?
Yeah, I guess I share your same like feeling of deflation afterwards, or just not deflation, but just kind of like, oh gosh, because often when you watch Adam Curtis documentaries, they're savage, they're quite poignant in pointing out truths and how we really got to certain situations, and definitely exposing, like in the past, the exposing of the West in various problems all over the world.
But just to say, I mean, and it's a viewpoint that I fundamentally agree with, but it is definitely from one specific political and social viewpoint. And it should be, because it's his political and social viewpoint, and that's fine. But particularly with this one, there was no grey area.
Yeah,
it was all like, here's the baddies doing the bad things, and this is the bad things that it's led to, and goodbye.
So I guess in the past it's been a bit like, oh, you know, the West think they're saving the world, but look at all the times the West actually created the problems. But then towards the end, whilst you're about to cut your wrists, there's some like suggestion of what the next step could be. Because the amount of times you watch them and you think, where is this going? This is just, people are just going to slit their wrists at the end of all this. And then there's some sort of hopeful message. Or at least like, you know, we can learn. Whilst there might not be a hope, there's like the point of this is to think about it, to realize it, and then, you know, you should be changed by this, and therefore moving forward would think differently, or so on and so forth. And I think this specifically about Can't You Get You Out of My Head, which was it's about how, why does every revolution fail, pretty much. And it's just 6 episodes long of just failed revolutions and people just feeling despondent and everything going wrong. You think, how is this gonna wrap up? And then at the end he makes a way of, I can't remember exactly how, but I remember thinking, God, he pulled that round. Like, I don't feel like everything is pointless, but I think the whole point of showing it was, let's learn from the past if we can, but appreciate that all these people thought they were learning from the past and still messed up.
I remember that being a very superficial ending, actually, though. And again, the thing is amazing. So I don't. It's the smallest of critiques, but I remember that. What I'm asking for isn't really a happy ending.
No, but I guess this one, I would say, is possibly meant to, or a way you could think about it is to show you the past, show you the similarities to now, and to kind of shake you a little bit to say, look, it's happening again. What can we do differently? But I wouldn't say that it necessarily did that. It kind of just, I think, I don't know, it just made you just feel a bit like, ugh.
See, I don't think it is, but I don't think that, I'm not sure I agree with that at all. I don't think it's happening again. I mean, I think if there's one thing that it showed, say what you want about, Thatcher came in with an actual philosophy. Yeah. It was a fucked up philosophy, but it was an actual philosophy, and changed things. And of course, we are all the time negative. At least there was a direction.
Well, that's something I definitely take from those Adam Curtis documentaries, because I think I've only ever lived in my memory of politics is Tony Blair onwards. And I was too young to really know what was going on then as well. So like my political memory is pretty much Gordon Brown onwards. And again, still, and then vaguely being aware of what he was doing. So to watch these documentaries and hear of politicians that had like, ideological and philosophical like thinking, and you just look at the politicians now and go, there's not even a shadow of that in people now, which I guess is, you know, what he leans towards is also politicians don't really have any power anymore. It is,
I was going to say politics isn't, politics doesn't have that. And that's as a result of Thatcher. So I mean, there's an ironic sort of circle there, but the problem is maybe the point I'm making is that that's all true. But so what do we do with this program? what I don't quite understand what we're supposed to be left with. Maybe I was stupid and I missed the point, but I don't think so. It just felt a little bit like everything's shit, goodbye.
Yeah.
And I don't think that again, I'm not really saying I wanted that program but with a happy ending. Not at all. What I'm saying is why on earth would someone of his talents choose that as the subject matter to make now? And again, I accept that I can see exactly why he's done that. I can see that that there's a mirroring and all, and stuff. I get that. But what I'm saying is he could have chosen any subject in the entire history of the world, or in modern history of the world. I mean, there's no answer to this. I'm just a bit confused. And it says something about the political climate that we exist around, I think, which is more or less a bunch of people saying this is bad, this is wrong, this is shit, this is bad, this is wrong, this is shit. But
no good options.
Yeah.
For
or if there is any good options, being really cynical about them, saying, well, that'll never happen. No, this is never going to happen. Well, we're always going to be stuck like this. And it's just that. And those things are probably all true. I get why people are coming from that place. Yeah. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we're pretending who we're going to be again. It's if we tell ourselves everything is shit continuously and just point out all of the shit things, then there's a cognitive dissonance to all of the good things.
Yeah.
And I suppose I don't want a happy clappy everything's fine Adam Curtis documentary, but it's like, why pick that? Like just the absolute. Again, something you've covered before in quite a lot of detail, and now you're just banging me on the head with it and making me watch elephants get upset and a dead horse.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure. It almost felt like it was cruel to the audience. Me, I suppose.
It did feel particularly cruel, especially with those animal bits. I mean, like an episode had ended and then they just showed something horrific. I don't know. I feel like, previous documentaries have said, no one has a vision for the future. No one can imagine what the future is about.
But that's just a fact.
That's just a fact. But this one just seemed like even more stark. Like, this is the last time someone envisioned a future, and didn't it go so bad? And since then, there's not really been one. So,
I mean, maybe it's worth dividing. I mean, I think it's not unfair to say, although simplistic as this definition always is, but it's not fair to say that Adam Curtis comes from the left, right? And so the left has at least always been a place that has looked to the future in a positive way. Yes, always complained about the present, always protested about things and what have you. But fundamentally, it's progressive. What is progressive? Progressive is progressing. Yeah. But the progressive message that we have, and whereas on the right or the conservatives tended to have more of a negative attitude towards at least the future and a more positive attitude towards the past. Yes. I mean, that's fundamentally what a conservative is and what a progressive is, right? But so if you're a progressive that can only see darkness in the future, then you're not a progressive. So that's not progressing anything.
And I guess that's it's a weird reflection of maybe what the world is like at the minute as well, isn't it? Is people are just shouting about what's not right, and no one's saying this is what we think should happen.
Exactly.
No one's got a good idea. Yeah, I think that was the main. I'm not politically minded at all nowadays, but my understanding is there isn't really anyone that's got what we're gonna do. Therefore, this is when we need people of vast intelligences and vast knowledge of social situations and history and the past, and also what the potentials for the future are, to stand up and say, here's an idea, might not work, but it's better than making Dave watch an elephant die. It's hard though. Is that I wonder, I don't know much about what a documentary maker would say. I think it's very modern for a documentary maker to also then be the philosopher and show you the way. And I don't know much about Adam Curtis, but I imagine he's probably someone who would say, that's not my job. My job is just to show you the facts, show you what's happened, show you what is.
But that's not what he does. No, that's not fair, I know. That's not what he does. I mean, he's definitely coming in with an agenda. Yeah, he's making a narrative. He's creating something. I mean, you could have told the exact story he told then and painted Thatcher in an amazing way. If he was a right winger who, was making a historical documentary about that period, you could paint her in a completely the opposite way if you wanted. But
I think it's the clever holding all the strings. Like, you can put your opinion through and through, But if people are it's a bit of a twist, really. If people are expecting a direction and to be pointed, and then they're not, and people get upset about it, your catchback is just, well, I'm just merely a documentary maker. I'm just showing you the way.
Oh well, that's a whole nother argument. I mean, that's the sort of Joe Rogan doesn't really know what he's talking about, and he's going to accept that he doesn't really know what he's talking about, but he's also going to tell you everything that he thinks, and he's going to say it as fact.
Well, it is kind of the left version of that.
And he's also going to say that legacy media is all completely corrupt and you should never listen to it, even though those people are much more intelligent than him and he doesn't really know anything, but he's going to tell you what he thinks. And I mean, that's the podcast world that we live in.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So you need experts that are above us.
True.
I'm not suggesting we're on par with Joe Rogan, but I think we probably are in intelligence levels.
I completely agree that, in my opinion, Adam Curtis is that. I just wonder what he would say to that. I think he might say that's a lot of responsibility and I'm not that.
No, but he's taken on that responsibility by making the thing in the first place.
I know, but then I wonder whether documentary makers are that.
Well, they're not now, are they? Because they're ex-TikTokers that want to make a selfie about themselves making a documentary about some true crime case that they don't understand. Yeah. I mean, that's what documentary makers are now, so that's fine. Ignore that. That's got nothing to do with Adam Curtis at all.
I know, but I think of people like John Ronson
skills
as well. John Ronson's got a lot of skills, but whilst he has an opinion, he does try and be like, I'm not trying to show you the way, I'm just trying to show you things.
Yeah. But sometimes he picks things that are quite positive, or at least, or fun.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that an Adam Curtis documentary should be fun, but
this one
again, it's not really about what he does. It's more about why he's chosen this subject at this time. That's my only critique.
Maybe it's due for a rewatch already. I watched it.
I can't sit through it again.
We can skip those bits.
Anyway, I would recommend it thoroughly to
never know.
Everybody out there listening. I mean, it is fantastic, and again, if you happen to be someone who's never watched an Adam Curtis documentary, I think all of them are on YouTube for free. I think they're probably all on the BBC thing. Definitely watch them. Some of the finest art being made currently.
Yeah, it's absolutely insanely good. We've rewatched them, I think, 3 times through, and I'm ready for the next rewatch of all of them because I just love them.
From the bottom, we would encourage you to watch.
Dave won't watch it again, but you should.
So yes, I don't think we really got to the bottom of that, but let's see if we can get to the bottom of our main topic for this episode. Which is right action. This is the 4th in our series of the Noble Eightfold Path, which I don't think we've explained apart from on the very first episode. So it is a Buddhist thing which teaches you what you should do to lead a good life.
There you go. That actually was good.
We came to it from a discussion about bullshit. Which, if you didn't listen to, it's probably the episode before we start the Eightfold Path.
Yeah, like 85,
so maybe go back to that one. If you've not listened to any other ones, it's probably worth listening to the other Eightfold Path ones as well for this to make any sense.
There you go.
But I think that the Eightfold Path is an ideal way out of the bullshit of the times that we live in.
I agree. And right action is a good enmeshing of quite a few of the other steps. So again, go listen to the other bits, but this one, as you'll find, does end up covering quite a lot of the others. As we're finding, actually, the Eightfold Path is very intermeshed. It's not like do this, then do this, then do this. It's all of them you should be doing all at the same time, and they all interdepend and interact with each other. Some more so than others, but yeah.
Although we have a subtle, slight disagreement about this, which we've never actually acknowledged. But I think probably if you've been listening, you realise this. If you actually listen to what we say, I feel you're right that they all enmesh and they could be in a circle and they could all just have arrows to each other. But I feel that to some extent, the order that we follow them in does kind of go in steps. You need the first 2 as a basis in order to do the next 2.
Yeah.
And then it leads on from there. But we can get to that. But I think that there's 2 different ways of viewing it, as with everything else.
No, I agree.
You can look at it in multiple ways. We are not expert Buddhists.
No way.
We're just having a little crack at it. We are going to use the words of some other expert Buddhists, as we have before. So, Siobhan, who have you got to tell us what right action is?
So, I'll start with Christmas Humphreys because it's one of
We
the
often
finest
do.
names. Yeah. Do you know what? I was really like, about that book to start with. But if you're in any way interested in Buddhism, Christmas Humphreys wrote a book called Buddhism. He's an Englishman that went out to India and learned some Buddhism in the, 40s, 50s.
I was going to say one of the first Westerners, I think, to bring it back.
He
the
started
Western
the Buddhist Society in London, as far as I'm aware. So he had some training with, I think it was more Zen. I think he had stuff to do with D.T. Suzuki. But anyway, he wrote a book called Buddhism, and it is a very good, it is a posh man in the 40s writing a book, so it is a bit fancy English at times. But it is a very understandable book given all that, and it explains everything very clearly. So if you're interested, that's a good one.
Or alternatively, you can just go on your TikTok and get some random girl from him.
Buddhism,
Essex to tell you about how Buddhism influences her hair care routine.
The Buddhist mindful way to do a face mask. So right action, he described that action is twofold. It's positive, what we do, and negative, what we refrain from doing. And what Buddhism, classic Buddhism, is very good at explaining is the negative side. So what you should refrain from doing, which we will get into as the 5 precepts.
Like Adam Curtis.
Don't do this. Don't do that. What is reinforced in every book that I'm going to refer to, actually, is the balance between the negative and the positives. It is very, again, highly on the 5 precepts, what we should abstain from doing, which we'll get to. But positives, there's a thing called dana, which is charity, love, and the ability to do good. And also about acquiring merit, which we'll get to at the end, I think, because I think it's really interesting. It's where right action and right motive kind of meet, and it's probably my main takeaway from about right action.
I've never heard it before. It's not come up in any of my reading, so I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
There's a good little bit. I'll get to that. I think get into the end because I think it leads to a discussion about when is right action wrong action. So S.N. Goenka, who taught us the Vipassana style meditation that we learned, this is a big part of it. He is one of the people that focuses on the negative stuff, when I say negative, it's not bad. I just mean positive means the things you do, negative the things you don't do, and there's a strong emphasis on abstaining. And actually he takes it from 5 precepts up to 7 and actually up to 10 to live like a full monk. But we won't dwell on that right now. He does reaffirm, though, if you're abstaining, it leaves nothing but right action. So the idea, that's why there's a heavy focus on the abstaining from things, is because it's quite fluffy to say do good. What does that mean? And do good only really works if all the other things are in place. Again, when it comes to acquiring merit, that's quite a thing. But if you at least don't do the things that are in the 5 precepts, you're pretty much only left with good stuff.
Well, this is very similar to a lot of other religions as well, isn't it? If you think about it, the 10 Commandments aren't you should go and do this. They're all do not do this, do not do that. And you can see those as being, I suppose you could even argue like the law of any given country is a similar sort of thing. And you could see those as being something which is, as I think most of us do, even if we're not bothered by them, as something which is sort of limiting your ability to the things that you want to do. But actually that's not. It's interesting. My first concept of this was through Buddhism, is that actually by not doing those things, you make things for yourself and for everybody else better.
Exactly.
And so, it's probably easy to see in, thou shalt not kill. Clearly, you're making the world a better place by not killing anybody else. Yeah.
But then, Buddhism will extend that to the life of everything and the, we'll get to it. But I do think it's interesting that all religions and all laws, there's something about human nature that we need to be told what not to do that comes up over and over again. I think that's really interesting. Something about human nature, the darkness maybe that's in everyone, or maybe let's not even call it darkness, but let's stick to calling it nature. Like there's something about humans where we, there was a time when you were tribal and you did kill people that came across your way in order to keep your children alive or to have a chance at having the food that was available. I just think it's interesting that it's common sense to us now, but I think it's taken a long time to get here. And I think things like ancient wisdom and Buddhism and old religions and just the fact that we have laws means that we do as human beings need these things.
Well, it's the difference between being an animal and being a human, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is the difference between being an animal and being a human? You could argue there's none, but society,
Yeah.
I suppose, is ultimately it. And society has rules and laws and norms and values for a reason.
Well, I think we're the only creatures that, once we're not dependent on our mothers, are still dependent on every other human being. Whereas
but that's
animals,
only because of the expectations we have out of life. So,
Yeah.
funnily enough, I was literally thinking about this the other day. I was watching one of the foxes who we've had in our garden, who've not been around for a while, but you spot them and you sort of think, and the fox was just laying in the sun, and I sort of thought, oh, that's nice. You know, sometimes I'm sure everyone's had this thought of like, God, look at that cat or that fox or whatever. They're just laying around, doing nothing, not a worry in the world.
Yeah.
And in so many ways, the reason why they haven't got a worry in the world is just because they don't need for anything.
Yeah.
You know, we need clean water because we've got used to clean water, whereas a cat can just lick it up from a puddle. You know, we need gut health because we've created gut health, whereas a fox just rips apart a mouse.
We also need people to work in factories packing our food for us,
Yeah,
because
of
we don't
course.
know how to grow things anymore. Like, it's...
But we've created a rod for our own back in
Exactly.
that respect, I suppose. And that's not a bad thing. It's
No.
just that that then involves rules and laws and
Yeah. Learning how to live with each other without just murdering each other all the time, as one of the precepts. One of the other books that I've read is the Buddha's Teachings, which is Thich Nhat Hanh. And when he focuses on right action, he does... So in Buddhism, there's tons of things that interlink and repeat each other, and I get very confused. But in reading Right Action, it did link two things for me. Because there are 5 mindfulness trainings, and they're quite long, and it's essentially things to contemplate and think about whilst you're, well, not think, but whilst you're doing mindfulness. And again, this brings mindfulness to right action. But the 5 mindfulness trainings relate directly to the 5 precepts of the same thing. So if you observe the mindfulness trainings, it helps you reaffirm the precepts. So it's basically like a little prayer for each precept almost. I imagine we probably said things while we were on the meditation training.
they were all in a foreign language.
No, but I think we had to... Well, we
I don't know what I said.
No idea.
I signed up to all sorts of things.
But we definitely took an oath, as it were. And so in reading the Thich Nhat Hanh book, reading of the mindfulness trainings kind of is like a way of reaffirming it, not longer than an oath, something like a prayer. And 4 of them are directly about right action, and the other one is about right speech, which we did last week. So but it's just a furthering of that intermeshing of the path around action, because he kind of reaffirms that in order to have right action, you have to have, like you were saying, you have to have gotten right thought, you have to have act right speech. I mean, speech is a form of action in a lot of ways, which is, again, a blending of the two anyway. But he also brings it all round to right mindfulness, which, again, we're not going to do for a few weeks yet.
Well, my understanding of this, which I think actually is probably wrong, but so as I prepared for this episode, I went off on one of all of what I thought, and then when I actually read through some of the literature, I found out that really I had the wrong idea of what wrong action is, right action is, and wrong action is. But still, I think it might be worth saying that to me, so we talked about speech on the last episode, and so in lots of ways, the first 2 of the 8 Noble Path gets you into the right mind frame, as it were. This is all going to be very secularized, simplistic versions of this. But it gets you into the right mind frame, and so therefore it causes what comes out of your mouth, and that is right speech, whereas right action is literally the equivalent of speech for what you do. And I think that could be how it's taken. But I mean, there's another side to this in relation to the mindfulness aspect, which is a thing that I'm certain that I've read somewhere, but I couldn't find it. And that is that ultimately right action is just the physical action of regularly meditating. Like, that is right action. And so one of the things that I didn't bring up on my kind of what's created a sense of awe is that, so we've been meditating more or less. I mean, I'll say it in an ideal sense. We've missed a few, but we've more or less been meditating twice a day since we got back from the silent retreat. And I found that and I think we've both found that as the time has gone past since the silent retreat, it's become harder and harder and harder to maintain concentration, and we'll get to concentration later, but it's been harder and harder basically to do the meditation.
Yeah.
And to some extent, the right action within that context is just to say, okay, I've not got anything out of meditation for the last 2 weeks, but I'm still going to sit down on this mat for 40 minutes, for an hour, whatever, and do my meditation, even if I sit down and my mind just wanders off for an hour, and then suddenly it's over and I think, oh shit, I didn't do anything there. Now, of course, within the training that we had, ultimately, there's no judgment. You should never put judgment on the quality of the meditation. I mean, that's ultimately what it is. There's nothing doing.
Nothing doing.
There's nothing doing with kind of saying this was good or this was bad. It's just you just do, and you don't judge it in any way, and that's more or less the secret behind the meditation. But I've found it harder and harder and harder to concentrate meditating, and about a week ago I just had about 3 days, and they've passed now and I'm back to my mind wandering, but I had about 3 days where meditation just became easy, and I'd sit down and I could just there was one time where the entire time I just had full concentration on my breath and on the sort of body scan thing that we do, and it was almost as if thoughts couldn't get in. Like I could feel the thoughts trying to get in, but they couldn't get in. And I just sort of thought to myself, so that was, I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that's happened to me in a long time. So I would have brought that up in the earlier bit, and the reason I bring it up is definitely not to boast, because ultimately, again, I can have no judgment on this. It's not like letting off a little party popper because you've done so well. There is no doing well. But the point that I'm trying to make is just that throughout those months where I was sitting down and meditating and thinking to myself, that was completely pointless, I'm not doing this right anymore, I've completely forgotten how to do this, I've lost my concentration. The fact that my right action was, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm going to do this regularly, I'm going to do it more or less at the same time every day, I'm going to stick to it. And sometimes we fuck it off, but for the most part we've stuck to it. It leads to that thing of like, oh shit, I've suddenly realised that there's this whole other space that I can go to that I had no idea even existed. Yeah. And my assumption is that, and maybe this is hopeful, but my assumption is that, in a year's time, if we stick to it, then suddenly the meditation will mean something completely to what it means now. And then a year after that, and then 5 years after that, the more that you do it, but in order to do it anyway, you have to do it. And that is right action to me.
No, I agree. Trusting that it's working, not doing it for any kind of immediate glorification, or you're just doing it because
apart from the glorification that I've just insisted on having by airing the fact that I did well in my meditation.
May you have crap meditation now. No, I'm joking. But it is a little bit
Somebody
like,
tell my mum.
But I it's just having faith, isn't it? It's trusting that it's working, and the trust in that it's working is part of the process as well. Like, it's just trusting in the kind of the ethereal nature of it, but also the fact that you are literally training your brain, and brain plasticity is improving even if you don't notice it immediately. And all of this is beneficial to then, reinforce your right action in general and help your thinking. And it's, again, that's where the intermission kind of comes in. Right action and mindfulness practice are completely intertwined in that respect. So it's interesting that you noted your meditation as your right action, because it's basically one and the same over and over again.
Yeah, it's sort of renunciation adjacent as well, isn't it? In as much as you put your faith in something else.
Yeah.
I heard an interview with a Buddhist monk who said when he first started meditating, he hated it, and he really hated it, and he went and he started the training to become a Buddhist monk, and he hated meditation, but he trusted in the fact that people who knew more than him told him that it was going to be good for him.
Yeah.
And so over the course of time of just going back to it and going back to it, like what we were talking about, and I think that there's something about that to me is faith.
Yeah.
Probably not too dissimilar to the sort of faith that someone might have in Jesus being resurrected. Like you accept that you don't know everything.
Yeah.
You accept that there are people that know more than you. You accept that there's a history of people that have had really good experiences from doing this thing. And so you say, do you know what? They know better than I do. Yeah. So I'm going to do what they tell me to do.
And I definitely got that feeling when we did the retreat, the videos of Goenka teaching you at the beginning. It's very like, this is so wonderful, it's going to make you so different after 10 days, and you're like, I'm super psyched for this now. Like, I trust this guy that I've never met, and
Dead.
And he's dead. But towards the end, I really liked the messages. It became a little bit more honest when you're in like day 7 and day 8, which is like, this has been great, but this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning, and even in this lifetime, you may only improve. Like, if there's 1,000%, if there's 100% to do, you might improve the 1%. But you're doing it, and I don't necessarily believe in this, but I do think as a metaphor it really works. The kind of, you're encouraging the seed of mindfulness and the Dharma in you, so that your next, the next person has a stronger seed. And to think of your own motivation for being there as gifted to you by someone before. Whilst I don't believe in reincarnation, I really like that as a metaphor for... It's a bit like, it's not really the same, and this is a not deliberate, but this is a bit of a swing. But it's a bit like that, doing well at the competition so that your team does well. It's a little bit like doing it external from you as well. Like, if your internal motivation is pretty shit, I always, I quite liked that idea of watering a seed that's in you, but that you didn't, it detaches your glory from it. Like, I have not worked hard to get this. I was gifted this by someone else, and it is my duty to continue looking after it, so that even if I don't get everything in this life, maybe the next person will. Again, I don't believe that, but as a metaphor, it's really good for those who, it's to remove glory and to, if you struggle to internally motivate.
But I'm not sure that there's necessarily anything to believe or disbelieve. I mean, if you're taking it as a metaphor, I think as a metaphor, it's absolute.
No, it's
because, I mean, taking your gym example, it isn't just the there and then, is it? The fact that 100 of you go to that gym means that gym will still be here in 10 years, which means that somebody else will be able to do that.
Yeah, that's so true.
And the fact that you're doing this competition and that you've all enjoyed it sets up the fact that probably next year it will happen. So if someone joins in the meantime, they'll get to have that experience
really
too.
True, yeah.
And then potentially, if you want to take that to the nth degree, although probably a CrossFit gym isn't the right way to do this, but in 100 years, let's assume that CrossFit gym is still there, and maybe it's even grown and there's 10 of them.
Yeah.
And then the children's children are now experiencing that same thing.
Yeah, no,
that's to me what reincarnation is.
I like that. Well, I think, yeah.
Apart from the tree that's going to grow out of my corpse.
Well,
because I'm leaving nothing else behind. I'm only going to leave fertilizer behind.
That's nice. That's nice. Grow a nice big tree out of you.
So you've read a number of different things, but I've just gone back to my man Brad Warner. I'm
sure he says it in a very cool, down-to-earth way, like, yo, dudes.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, he's not like this at all, but sometimes I do, when you read his books, it does feel a little bit like he's just turned his cap backwards.
Yeah.
The items cited in the most ancient Buddhist texts under the heading of right action ended up being the first 5 precepts of the 10 precepts. Namely, and we'll go through these, don't kill, don't steal, don't misuse sex, don't lie, and don't get high. To me, and this is where he turns his cap backwards.
I mean, he already has, because those 5 precepts are get high is not what the Buddha says.
All right. Sure, brace yourself if you think that was cap backwards. To me, right action just means don't be a jerk. In one of my books, I paraphrased Dogen as saying, even if the whole world is nothing but a bunch of jerks doing all kinds of jerk-type things, there is still liberation in simply not being a jerk. Now, you sigh, but I love that. I think that's perfect, actually.
It is wonderful.
Ultimately, I think that probably Buddhism, if you want to encapsulate it into anything, and Brad Warner did actually call one of his books this, is just don't be a jerk. Cap backwards or not.
Well, I think it's... what I like about that quote is it's... Even if someone's horrible to you... It's about breaking the cycle. It's like someone's actions to you doesn't dictate your actions back to them. Like, you are so in control of your actions. No one can make you do anything. And if someone's horrible to you, being horrible back isn't going to serve any purpose, is what I guess they're saying. It's like, just treat someone with kindness and nip that. And the cycle of misery doesn't have to continue. Yeah,
which maybe this is pushing the point a little bit, but maybe that's what I felt about that Adam Curtis documentary. Like, no, in all seriousness, though, that's the thing, isn't it? Society's not very good at the moment.
Yeah.
So by churning out things that just say...
Be angry.
And society's not very good at the moment, it's just perpetuating society not being very good. And, it's like an ever-decreasing circle in a way that you could actually maybe try and make an ever increasing circle. And I think that's what mindfulness is to me, or like maybe not what mindfulness is, but like what right action is probably, is doing things to try and make the world around you better, but being very aware. Again, being not just being aware of what you don't know, but being aware of what you can't actually make any difference to.
And this is my feelings about a lot of things in the zeitgeist at the minute, and it's definitely where, for further reading, definitely do read the Thich Nhat Hanh stuff, because he is someone who was very pro-protest and pro not kind of sitting by and doing nothing, but within a way that is right action and is right motive, which I think is really, I don't want to say lacking, but it's definitely not. But I query people's whether everyone who is very pro causes right now is doing right action or really bringing any kind of positivity to the world. But we can maybe not dwell on that because it's pretty miserable. So anyway, we've danced around these 5 precepts quite a lot, so maybe we should go through them one by one. Some of them are very obvious, I would say. But again, things that are obvious sometimes still need spelling out for people, because that's what we've learned from history. That's why we have precepts, that's why we have 10 commandments, that's why we have laws. The first is to abstain from killing any living creature.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously vegetarianism and veganism comes into this to some extent. But so does, I think, just being thoughtful of... There's no way of not sounding like a hippie. Mm-hmm. When we were on the silent retreat, there was all of these sort of funny little things that were there. So, for example, there was a fly catcher, which I think was a cup in the bathroom that you could... So that you could catch the fly but then release him and not kill him and things like that. I mean, I don't really say that with any sort of cynicism. I mean, I don't want to kill a fly either. But there is something about making an oath with a bunch of other people, particularly when it's a bunch of other people you don't know, where you all state for the next 10 days, I'm not going to kill anything. And obviously, I don't think I've killed anything. I mean, on purpose, I've never killed anything. But I mean, there's something that makes you sort of super aware of your... walking around the woods, you're slightly more aware. Maybe it's more subconscious of not like treading on anything. And I guess the negative is to abstain, but the positive is that you notice more and you respect things more, isn't it? I think it's also something to be said for... We've watched a lot of podcasts around human consciousness, and I would argue that considering the ways in which we don't kill anything, in a way could be described as like human responsibility that no other animal has. All other animals have to kill something to survive. There aren't many that aren't doing that. And even those who don't kill for food aren't given a toss if they stand on a beetle. Whereas the fact that we're self-aware enough, it could be a curse, I appreciate. But the fact that we have it is now kind of our... I would say Buddhism sits within this in describing it as a human responsibility. Like we... for better or worse, have this consciousness. So because we have awareness, it is a moral decision not to kill, as opposed to, any other reason. So, And I suppose if you want to take it, which I think is probably what you were just referring to earlier, so I'm just going to pull the plaster off. It's not just whether you kill or whether you don't kill. It's about wishing death on people. I mean, we had a conversation not too many episodes ago about this CEO of some healthcare company that this fucking handsome boy killed, and how there was, to some extent, a tongue-in-cheek and to some extent a very genuine celebration of that. And you told me recently about somebody chanting death, death, death to Jews, basically. Yeah. Those people aren't killing anybody. And by the way, nor are they remotely likely to ever kill anybody in the name of their supposed politics, which are clearly not really their politics, but are just there to try and get as much publicity as possible on the biggest event that they can possibly find. But if you're going to start throwing around, and this is something that I've noticed like creeping, well, maybe not creeping in, maybe it's always been a case. I think when you're around alternative politics and when you're around sort of people that protest, the sort of, I mean, the millions of dead cops, for example, might be, I mean, however old they are, there's a lot of talk of just like, like any police officer dying is brilliant or something, because that's what you believe in. But ultimately, and maybe this is too big of a an issue to really address right now, because I mean you could talk for hours about it, but does that do you any good? Does it do the... I mean, in fact, ignore whether... Because, I mean, ultimately, if I say I want Israeli troops to die, it makes no fucking difference at all to any cause. At all. Like, not at all. But, so, the only person it affects is me. And I suppose maybe anybody listening to me, but probably most people listening to me are either going to go, yeah, or they're going to go, he's a prick. And that's the end.
I just feel like, what is the purpose of wishing horrors upon someone else, especially when...
Well, again, publicity.
Yeah, but when you're like wishing horrors upon someone because they've done horrors to someone else, it's not really the same, but it is a bit the same. Black Mirror, the first episode, was everyone really like, yes, the Prime Minister's going to fuck a pig on TV. Brilliant. Can't wait. So want this to happen. This is awful and I can't wait for it to happen. When it happened, it is... You don't see it, but you watch everyone's reactions to watching it and no one is happy. Like, everyone's got what they said they wanted here and no one is happy. And I feel this way about when people who are very left and very, want to be progressive and da-da-da-da. It was the same with, people saying, oh, if only Donald Trump had been shot in the face. And you're like, do you want to watch someone get murdered on TV? Do you actually want people to die? Because that's not really all right. And if you're saying it, I'm not saying that this is how it goes. But you could be like, oh, no, I don't really. But you're saying it out loud. And I feel like people are impressionable and there's a feeling in culture. So if it becomes more normalised to start screaming death to people...
Yeah, a psychic toll.
It becomes... Yeah, a psychic toll is a really nice way to say that.
Yeah.
But it becomes the norm that we just express... And this is right speech, but I think speech does come into action. It becomes normal to do these things and to say these things. And eventually, if you say it enough... It will become normal to do these things. And it's, again, a CEO got murdered and everyone was happy. It's happening already.
It's how the Nazis happened, sure.
Yeah. And everyone
slowly but surely,
everyone thinks
really strange ideas get normalised, and then before you know it, they've run away with themselves.
But at the minute, people think they're fighting the thing that is the fascism, but it's everyone's doing the same thing at each other.
Yeah,
I just don't think it's just hard.
I think it's not hard. This is the thing, because again, I just want to sort of restate this point. It makes no difference to the world.
Yeah.
So the only person it makes a difference to, and again, I really don't think it even makes a difference to anyone listening, because everybody's made their mind up. So either they hate you now or they love you now, but it makes no fucking difference. Yeah. No one's going to be like, oh shit, I never thought of it like that. Yeah, actually, yeah. So it's not going to change anyone's mind. Or if it changed anyone's mind, it's just going to be like, oh, for fuck's sake. All right, I think I'm out on this cause now, because I can't be with these people. So ultimately, the only person that it creates a psychic toll on is you. And there's no proof for this. I can't say that this is absolutely factual, but I think that every time one wishes death upon another human being, it kills your soul a little bit. It crumples you up inside. It's the little 12-year-old boy in your heart just gets a little bit sadder and a little bit more crippled. Yeah.
But that then impacts on your ability to do right action, to do right thinking, to do right speech. Like, it's just so intermeshed, isn't it? Yeah. You just become a...
But again, but the other thing is, it's the end point. Now, I mean, we're talking about speech, I suppose, now as well. We've gone off topic a little bit, but it's the end point of having wrong thinking, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is the thing. What you're doing is you're showing off how fucking dumb you are. Yeah. To the world, or to another person, or to a group of people, or whatever.
And if you're celebrated, it's just this like.
But you're celebrated by other people that are equally as damaged as you are. Yeah. And then it's very similar to that thing that we just talked about with the CrossFit gym. That in 10 years' time, hopefully it's still here, and more people get to experience this positive thing that you've experienced. Yeah. It does the opposite version of that. It crumples up all the other people's little 12-year-old boys in their heart. And slowly but surely they become more and more crippled and more bitter and more deadened. And what does that lead to? Well, we don't know. I mean, there's no way. I mean, that's quite an obscure concept anyway. There's no way. I can't even say that that's absolutely definitely true. But I mean, I think there's some truth in it.
I like it.
You're not supposed to like it.
Sorry. Right. Well, that's not killing.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is not killing.
That is
Next.
Not killing. Number 2, to abstain from stealing. I feel like this is pretty obvious.
Well,
but
I think it's. Yeah, I think for all that we need to say about it, it's the same as not killing, isn't it? Doing something bad to another person ultimately. Is so it has the same psychic toll on you. I mean, that maybe the difference with stealing, if you're stealing directly from another human being, is that they are directly affected by it, whereas maybe they're not so much if you just. It's more like killing than talking about killing.
Thich Nhat Hanh relates this also to social injustices and fighting those sorts of things, because I think what he's saying is also if you're exploiting others or if you're gaining from the suffering of someone else, so it's like stealing their well-being as well as stealing their actual items. So it's the negative is to abstain from stealing, but the positive is if you see human suffering, not to partake in it and to help if you can, which is where it starts linking to fighting social injustice, but it's doing it with the right thinking, like you say, and right motive.
But I do think it's about what effect it has on you again, because so there is obviously an argument of like, well, Tesco's are evil, so if I want to go and steal a loaf of bread, then I'll go and steal a loaf of bread from Tesco's and it's fine. And in a sort of superficial way, I think that's true. Like, actually, I mean, I wouldn't shed any tears about Tesco's, but there is something more complex. I mean, I work for quite a big company, and I'm very much aware of the sheer amount of sort of shoplifting that goes on, and I'm also aware of the fact that there is a genuine risk of that shoplifting ultimately leading to that shop not being there anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't think people think about it. They sort of think to themselves, well, I mean, in the case of Tesco's, maybe that is true. But in the case of a lot of like maybe more medium-sized big business, you just figure, oh, well, they're fine. But actually, I saw not too long ago, a little independent record shop got robbed. And the guy that runs the little independent record shop said something like, and he was trying to be cool. He turned his cap backwards, I think. He was trying to be cool, and it's fair enough what he said. Initially, I thought to myself, yeah, that's fair enough. He basically said, if you're going to steal from someone, why would you steal from somebody like the little guy? We'll go and steal something from HMV. The thing is that HMV has largely gone out of business, and there is an HMV. There happens to be an HMV in our town, and it's the only place that you can go and get music from, and you can critique it. But HMV isn't like some massive conglomerate anymore. It's like it's a dying business which isn't going to be around for very long, which is currently giving 10 people jobs and providing me with all the heavy metal CDs that I need, and that is not important. But it's like I get his point, but actually, maybe don't steal from anyone would be better.
Well, I thought this when there's a couple of things. What you were just saying about stealing from Tesco's. Imagine you're stealing from a Tesco's where for some reason the stock check has done really well and they notice. In fact, this happened. One of our patients got accused of stealing some razors from Asda, and Asda, next time he went in, said you're banned because you stole some razors. And it turns out this person had not stolen razors, but there was a packet missing, and it was because the person had not scanned it through the till. But their stock check was so regimented that they noticed there was a packet missing, and the persons that were on that day were going to be punished. And so my thinking is, Asda and Tesco's are assholes. You can steal from them, that's fine. But if you steal from them, it's not Tesco or Asda that are going to be punished or feel anything about whether you stole a loaf of bread. I also think, stealing if you're poor and all this other stuff, it's very complicated. But stealing because you're getting at someone, you're not going to get to no one gives a fuck that you stole that one thing. That corporation isn't like, oh, boo-hoo. Don't shop there. But the person who's that has a livelihood, who maybe works at Tesco's because they love it, or maybe works there because they can't do anything else, and you're fucking over. It's the same with when Wetherspoons. Everyone was boycotting Wetherspoons, and someone I know who works at Wetherspoons was like, I need this job, and if people don't fucking come to Wetherspoons, I don't have this job, and I don't have anything else lined up. And I was like, actually, Wetherspoons don't give a fuck. They could close now and the man who runs it will be minted for the rest of his life. So if it all shut down, he'd be fine. But all the people that work there wouldn't be. So I always kind of think protesting and doing things for social injustice and all this other stuff is always so much more complicated than anyone ever cares to want to think about.
No, yeah.
And it's just like, actually think about, I'd rather make sure the little person or the person that's real who works in Tesco's isn't punished, and Tesco's, the corporation, is going to have to just carry on. Little me stealing a pack of razors isn't gonna do it. It wasn't me that stole these razors, by the way.
Oh, the lady doth protest.
I know, but it's just one of them things. I just always think it's funny when people are like, "Oh, I won't go there," and I'm like, "Cool, if you won't go there, that's fine. But if you want to like damage that place or like steal from there, then you're a piece of shit."
Yeah, agreed.
So, there we go.
And it's not going to make your life any better.
No, not at all.
I mean, maybe a loaf of. I mean, if you're hungry and you need a loaf of bread, that's that. But ultimately,
that's different.
People that are saying, "I'm not going to Weatherspoons because I don't like the man that runs it." They're not desperate people who need a loaf of bread.
No,
do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a very privileged protest that you're making.
It 100% is. Like, I won't take my business there. I'll go to that posh one down the road, sells pints for £8 a pint. Anyway, number 3, to abstain from sexual misconduct.
I mean, I suppose there's so many different ways of looking at this, which are fairly obvious.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree that this is a massive one, just based on Thich Nhat Hanh has dedicated a huge part of this chapter to this sexual misconduct, which is interesting because at first there's a few obvious ones that come straight to mind, you know, sexual abuse, rape, and, you know, porn is not brilliant. There's lots of ways in which sexuality and sex is damaging. But he extrapolates it even further. He talks about, you know, the people, you know, hurt people sort of thing. So he talks about, you know, if a child witnesses their mother in a abusive relationship or experiences, you know, worse off experiences abuse themselves, they grow up to be a not healthy human being, a damaged person. And it's like the cycle continues sorts of thing. So it's about not just doing it for the sake of your own well-being and not to hurt someone else, but it's thinking about that kind of ripple effect out. And it's such a huge one that has the potential to hurt so many people. Yeah. In that respect.
Yeah. I mean, that ripple effect is probably the big part of it, which almost, to me, makes me think of like karma in that kind of practical way that karma works. Which is another reason, the reason that you do right isn't just to sort of feel good about yourself and do right, or equally even necessarily just to be, you know, work within the law of your country or whatever. It's about not passing down negative stimulus, I suppose. And so I think those things that you've mentioned are all we can't cover. So I'm not glossing over them. Ultimately, those are the things that this is talking about. Well, it's not talking about porn because porn didn't exist, and that's become a much bigger problem. But a problem that I think we've touched on in the past, and I'm sure we'll talk about again. So I won't bother with that either. But as with everything in Buddhism, I always take this to be more around the thing. I almost said the things that you do to yourself, but I know what that sounds like in this context. I mean, it does include that. But,
I was about to say, and other religions really like hone in on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It does come up a lot.
Hey,
sorry.
But it's about the effect that. So those are the extreme ends, which unquestionably are true. But I think that often something I've read about where this actually came from is more towards Buddhist monks who weren't necessarily a bunch of rapists running around or partiers or whatever. They were just people that were trying to live their life. And so in the context of them, some of it was about not monk on monk action, I think, because they were obviously all, you know, stuck in the middle of nowhere in single gendered places living in close quarters. Yeah. So I think there was the rest of their lives. Yeah. So there was an element of kind of, stick away from that. Prison sex.
Leave each other alone and meditate, for fuck's sake.
But I think it was more about again, it's like the psychic toll that it has on you. Yeah. And I think that this is another subject which is too big to cover here really quickly. But even if you're not, even if your sexual practices aren't problematic in that way of the things that you've mentioned, they can be extraordinarily damaging on yourself. Yeah. If you around, I suppose, or and I think that we live in a culture which says to be successful and also to be kind of hip, there's no, just fuck anybody you want, don't worry about it, as long as there's consent, do what you want, it's fine. And I'm not judging that at all, and people can do what they want, and it's absolutely none of my business, and I don't have any feelings about it one way or the other. And this is definitely too big of a subject just to bring up, but I'm just going to bring it up, and then we'll talk about it longer later. But it's about the sort of best way to live, isn't it? It's about it's about like the people that you can hurt even in doing that.
Yeah.
I read a book not too long ago, which I think is probably written by someone vaguely problematic, but it's called The Case Against the Sexual Revolution, and it's about the ways in which the sexual revolution, which is generally seen, particularly from a progressive standpoint, as being a completely positive thing, actually has had all of these damaging effects on the back end to mostly to women, but actually to everybody. And, you know, porn is a huge part of that, which again, you know, we'll talk about one day in more depth, I suppose. But it's about the things that having how is it worded in your thing? Right sexual...
To abstain from sexual misconduct.
So it depends what you take as being misconduct as well. And again, I'm not coming from a place of judgment at all, but it's about working out what you want and then not doing something else just because it's expected of you from society.
I was about to say, it's the expectations, isn't it? It's whatever expectations are out there. And now there's all bets are off in a way. You can kind of do and say and have sex with whoever and whatever you want nowadays, and there's a corner of the internet for everyone. But I don't know. It is a huge topic. I don't know how we would ever cover it all.
Well,
but
let's try. Once we've done the Noble Eightfold path, we'll have a crack.
We'll
at
come
this
straight
one.
back to sex.
Yeah, to be continued, ladies and gentlemen.
TBC. Number 4 is to abstain from false speech. We did right speech last week.
Yeah.
And this is basically, this precept covers that, to be honest. So, like I said earlier, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about 5 mindfulness trainings. We're going in depth with the other ones, but the 4th one is about speech, and we've already covered it, to be honest. So the 5th one is to abstain from intoxicants, which is, you know, one to think about nowadays as a...
Nowadays.
Well, you know, it's funny. Intoxicants is the wide umbrella. At the minute, people are probably drinking less alcohol, but there are drugs that are just frequently... Things are getting normalised, things are getting legalised, things are... Especially at the minute within, science that are exploring human consciousness, it's become very normal to do MDMA therapy, MDMA trials. People are talking about psilocybin. It's all kind of out there and very normalised right now. So it's an interesting time to think about intoxicants, I would say.
Yeah, there's also an interesting overlap within Buddhism and those intoxicants, isn't there? So in many ways, and there has been scientific tests done on this, what you get out of meditation is like a very slow version of what you get out of taking mushrooms or MDMA.
Yeah.
But it's not instant. So the other thing that I haven't mentioned yet, which could well have gone on my what I've done to create list, is that I read a book called Lost Connections by Johann Hari, who wrote Stolen Focus, which we've definitely talked about at some point in the past. He's not really a writer I like that much, actually. I've read all of his books now, and 2 of them I've hated, and then 2 of them I've absolutely loved.
And watching him be interviewed makes you immediately hate him.
I find him slightly annoying, but that's neither here nor there. And it was hard because he's got a very mildly annoying voice. And when I read Stolen Focus, I'd never heard him talk before, so I read it and I sort of pictured him being one thing, and then I heard him talk and he annoyed me. But now I can't read anything by him without reading it in his voice. Yeah. And so that does create a bit of a roadblock. Anyway, Lost Connections is fundamentally actually about depression and about how... Oh, it's an incredibly interesting book, which I would really recommend to anybody, particularly if you've ever taken or are taking pretty much any, maybe not any, but more or less any psychiatric medication. Because some of the it's not a new book, it's like 10 years old or something, but some of the findings in it are unbelievable. I mean, it's more or less it shows that most antidepressants don't work any more than a placebo, pretty much. That's very simplistic, but that's more or less what it finds. And so the concept of the book is about how we've been sold this idea of mental health being your brain chemicals are wrong and you need this tablet and that'll make your brain chemicals right. But actually there's no proof of that at all. And the only proof that there is of the things that actually make any difference to one's mental health, and we've seen this a million times, you feel depressed, you get given some pills, they make you feel better. 6 months later, they stop making you feel better, so you get more of those pills. 6 months after that, they don't make you feel better, so you take more of those pills. And then eventually you get to the top dose and they start making you feel better. And so you go on to the next one up.
Yeah.
And there's very few people that don't go on that journey.
With cruddy side effects.
With
awful effects if you try and come off them. So anyone who tries to come off them feels crap and goes back on them. It's it could be a conspiracy theory, but it's very much a pharmaceutical company trap.
No, absolutely. And the thing is the things that have actually been proved to actually improve your mental health are all the things that we all probably know about, but it's exercise and it's community and it's having time in the outdoors and it's to some extent it's some of the things that we talk about, having sort of faith in other things and in institutions and this sort of stuff.
What do you think about therapy?
He doesn't actually touch on it as much as you would think in a book about it, but he's generally pro, I think. Let's not get into that again.
No.
We covered that last time.
We've done that.
Again, it's probably a subject that we'll pick up again in the future. But the point that I'm trying to make anyway, why this is appropriate to discuss now, is that it's about our expectations as human beings.
Yeah.
So ultimately, what happens is what we would like is that if we feel bad, we want something that in 2 weeks' time will make us feel better. Mm-hmm. But actually, in reality, that thing doesn't really make you feel better. Either it's completely a placebo effect, it could be an argument, or it's some sort of like very short-term sort of band-aid on a broken leg. So whereas actually the things that we need to do in order to feel better are long-term, they take potentially years.
Yeah.
Meditation being a big one of them, he talks about meditation in the book.
And you can do it preventatively.
Of course.
I mean, I've said that right, but preventatively.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, there are, difficulties around this. Of course, when you're feeling at your most depressed, the last thing you want to do is go out, and there's that cycle. But accepting all of that, ultimately, the quick fix is just not the fix. Mm-hmm. And so, why I bring that up is because a lot of people are wanting to take mushrooms and MDMA in order to have a spiritual experience, because you can take a pill and 2 hours later you'll have a spiritual experience. But the spiritual experience that you have is almost certainly, and again, there have been studies around this, and I don't think we're at a point where anything has been proved, but it's almost certainly not as long lasting, not as actually effective, and not as genuine, and not really spiritual. It's kind of like cosplay of a spiritual experience. And so whereas if you meditate for 2 years, you potentially have that same experience, but it's a slower one. But of course, our bodies weren't made. You can say what you want about mushrooms. I mean, I'm certainly not against drugs or anything necessarily, but something like MDMA is absolutely not real. It's not a real substance. It's been created, and same goes for most drugs, but not mushrooms and not weed
or opiates.
Yeah, but although you got to do quite a lot to opiates, you can't just munch on them.
Yeah, but we have opiate receptors in our brain.
Yeah.
We already have these things.
But it's like I say, it's that different. And I think this is something that Buddhism is a lot about. Ultimately, it's the difference between having the quick fix and having and you can apply this to absolutely everything in your life. I'm going to use diet again. You can eat the bowl of Cocoa Pops and it will be delicious on your tongue, but within 20 minutes of eating it, all you've got is all the sugar and the shit running around in your system, and you're not going to feel full. You're not going to feel any of the positives. Or you can eat something really healthy, and it's not going to be as immediately enjoyable, but over the course of time, it's going to make you feel a million times better than if you eat a bowl of Cocoa Pops every day, or you eat seeds. The seeds are going to make you feel better eventually. Yeah. And I think that kind of sums up the Buddhist path, to me, anyway, in a way. It's kind of like the hard thing that will get you the actual results, not the easy thing that's going to sort of get you a vague version of the results.
It's trusting the process and along the way having other benefits, because there's no way this couldn't benefit you. You've just got to do it. Yeah. But the doing of it feels like effort, because you have to dedicate time, you have to dedicate effort. But
it's not just effort, is it? It's going without things. I mean, this is another thing, like you were saying about all of these right action things. Most of them sound quite negative. It is all renunciation. It's not having the things that we think we deserve and that we think we should have.
So I just want to come back to this acquiring of merit thing. It's this kind of concept of, you've heard it, you do something nice for someone else and you'll feel better yourself, but you can't do the nice thing for someone else only to get the nice feeling.
Yeah.
And this is where merit is a bit difficult for me, because the acquiring of merit is a big deal in Buddhism. Christmas Humphreys writes about it. It ensures the pleasant consequences of your deeds. This doctrine of merit, which forms a large part of the life of common people in Theravada countries, is a useful application of karma to the daily round. So you can store up merit or good karma by daily acts of kindness, knowing that a day in the future, each act will bring its due reward. Which I think is problematic immediately in some ways. It's nice. It's doing nice things for the sake of doing nice things, but it's not doing it for the sake of it. It's doing it because the upshot is also in the future you might get a nice little karmic reward.
Yeah, I think you might be seeing that through Western eyes a little bit, though, because I think the way that a Westerner hears that is more or less, I'm storing these up because I'm storing up my chips because I'm going to get to pay them in at the end. I don't know that that's necessarily exactly how it's meant.
Well,
I think it's more of a metaphor for what we're talking about, in as much as like doing good things slowly but surely will make you feel better about yourself.
Yeah, which no doubt it does. Like, it definitely does that. And I also really like the idea of planting seeds for the future. You know, one of Thich Nhat Hanh's thing about the alcoholism was, you might think that 2 glasses of wine a day is not a problem. You don't feel like you're an alcoholic, but you're planting the alcoholism seed. If you have children, you pass it on to them, or if they witness, and even if it's not genetic,
as well.
Exactly, you're normalizing it, and so your children will then think that that's normal. But he does point out this problem with motive and right action, because I think there is one. The motive, however, is more important than the deed. The effects of the deed are manifold, depending on the factors. An act is an outward expression of a thought, which in turn is coloured by emotion, and the latter two characteristics form motive, good or bad. The thought and act are hence inseparable. A good deed done with wrong motive may benefit others, but will in the end be harmful to the doer's mind, for the mind is the maker of karma, good or bad, and hence the intention of the mind at the time of action determines the incidence of the resulting merit. As all life is one, it follows that the merit of a deed will be proportionate to the extent to which all living things are helped thereby. So basically, if you're doing a nice thing, but you're not really doing it for the right reason, ultimately it's still not 100% great.
Interesting that the karma, the thing there was about it coming from the mind. I quite like that's always been my understanding of karma, not as some sort of version of woo-woo, but whereby there's some god that's saying you did something good, so you're going to get something good. But just this thing that we're talking about of, and I think that's what that describes. Again, you can view it. It sounds a little bit like you're collecting good deeds, so that you can get a good thing yourself. But I do think that's a really westernized version of looking at it. I do think, because if you think of it from a more of a collectivist perspective, which of course is, certainly Zen Buddhism all comes from a collectivist country, it reads slightly differently. I
just think it puts a lot of emphasis back on the thought and not the action. Like, action is really important if it's an extension of your thought. But I just think, non-action, like if you don't actually harm someone, but you say it or think it, because that's the thing, like harming someone is awful. Telling someone to harm someone is still bad, but maybe not as bad as doing it yourself. And thinking of harming someone is still not as bad as saying it or actually doing it. But what Buddhism is saying, well, actually, no, all these things are really bad.
And they're bad for you.
And they're bad for you.
They're bad for the little 12-year-old boy in your heart.
Exactly. So just thinking harm upon someone else is because I think, again, Western world is definitely, everyone thinks shit about other people and thinks, oh, it's okay because I didn't say it, or I didn't actually do anything about it, even though I really, think under my breath that person's awful. What Buddhism is pointing out is it is still harmful, and like you say, it's harmful to you, and the upshot is you still will act in a way that is not 100% pleasant, whereas it'll interfere with the way you act in tiny little ways that you're not really conscious
absolutely
of.
Well, it will normalise the idea of wishing death upon somebody else,
exactly,
which over the course of many, many years and potential decades becomes a concentration camp.
Happy stuff. So everything I'm reading seems to just fall into this. And I'm reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius at the minute, just to try and get my head around some Stoic stuff. And Stoicism and Buddhism has so many overlaps. And the bit I read last night, it was the last thing I read, and I thought, I'm going to stop now because I have to remember this for the morning. It's in book 9, and each book is kind of separated into just thoughts. There's bits of it that I just think are so appropriate for action and intertwining thought and motive into action. And when others stray off the course, you can always try to set them straight, because every wrongdoer is doing something wrong, doing something the wrong way. And how does this injure you anyway? You'll find that none of the people you're upset about has done anything that could have damaged your mind. But that's all that harm and injury could mean. Yes, boorish people do boorish things. What's strange or unheard of about that? Isn't it yourself you should reproach for not anticipating that they'd act this way? So when you call someone untrustworthy or ungrateful, turn the reproach on yourself. It was you that did wrong by assuming that someone with those traits deserved your trust. Okay, he's a bit like cynical and stuff. But I guess what he's thinking about here is more right thought and not so much action, but it does come on to that. What did you expect from helping someone out? Isn't it enough that you've done what your nature demands and you want a salary for it too? As if your eyes expected a reward for seeing or your feet for walking. That's what they're made for. By doing what they were designed to do, they're performing their function. Whereas humans were made to help others. And when we do help others or help them to do something, we're doing what we were designed for. We perform our function. There's something in here, and if I'm very new to Marcus Aurelius, but he's very keen on the nature of things and things just being as they are. And what I think he's like alluding to here is humans' nature is to be with others and to be nice to each other for the sake of it. And so this kind of intertwines right motive, right thought, and right action all together. It's just like, don't expect people to be anything that they're not. Everything that they do is correct because it's nature. You can create your own narrative about what they're like, but at the end of the day, you just have to accept it. Your thoughts are your own, your feelings are your own, and you create every feeling that you have is because of your own thoughts. So leave off the other person. But also help for the sake of helping and don't expect any reward for it. It's just literally what you're meant to do.
Well, that is definitely a very Buddhist idea of positive action or positive speech or positive anything is good for its own sake.
Yeah.
If you expect results from it, then you've already tarnished it.
Yeah.
There's no, that's the bit where you don't. That shouldn't even. It's easier said than done, but that shouldn't even come into your consideration. Just doing something good. There's something in Lost Connections about this is a genuine study that's been done multiple times, I believe, and it's something along the lines of they give $10. Probably, I think it's in America. They give $10 to people, and they say, spend this on yourself, or they give $10 to people and they say spend this on somebody else. Doesn't matter how, you can give it to a homeless person or you could buy your friend a gift or whatever, and they've done this multiple times, and they test the happiness before and after, and it's always the case that the person that's even though they've been told to do it, you know, it doesn't really matter the circumstances, they're happier after doing that than the person that's bought something for themselves. And I think that kind of sums it up in a way, because you could say, you could be cynical and you could say, the person that's bought a gift for somebody else is just hoping to get a gift back, or they're hoping that person will go and say, God, Dave's great, he bought me this gift. Yeah. And maybe that is true for a lot of people. Maybe I think that is probably the Western mindset. I mean, that is probably how most of us view things. But actually, fundamentally, we should just, that bit, and again, easier said than done, should be completely removed. And it's just done for its own sake. Well,
and easier said than done because we live in a world where individual desires are rated much higher than looking out for someone else, because that's how,
but then we're also in a world where everyone's fucking miserable.
Yeah, so, I mean, exactly.
You don't need science. You don't need a scientific experiment to show that all of the behaviours that are normalised in the Western world at the moment aren't leading to flourishing. Well, because no one's flourishing.
Exactly. All your targeted adverts aren't saying buy this for your friend. They're saying buy this for you.
Absolutely.
And no one's happy. And it's just prioritising. Yeah, I really like that experiment. It's come up we've watched so many different podcasts about happiness experts and happiness experiments, and that one always comes up, and it's just a stark reminder of doing good for the sake of doing good.
So I think we should leave it there, really. Yeah. I would like to just point out that Marcus Aurelius is probably the first man to turn his cap backwards, though, before writing most of his stuff. I mean, it would have been a crown, I suppose. He would have. Yeah. I don't know if Roman emperors could turn their weird leafy crowns backwards, but
it's definitely. I don't know if it's the translation I've got or if it's what he truly wrote, but my goodness, some of it is very sat on a chair backwards.
When I was very young, some friend of mine, or probably his parents, had the Street Bible. And it was the New Testament, but it was written like, listen, dudes. Yeah, there was this great fella, right? Yeah, and it had a lot of rights. Yeah. like guys, guys, like Jesus was so cool, right? And it was all that, and it was just written like that. It was fantastic.
Was it the person that did a nice rap for you in school?
No. That was a terrible, terrible nerdy boy who was like 7 years older than us, but who got bullied by people of my age. It was a very terrible time for him. You should never, on the off chance that you're at school and you're in the region of 17, you should never go into an assembly with a boombox and do particularly if you're very skinny and nerdy, and do a rap about how great Jesus is to a bunch of 13-year-old. I was going to say boys, but I mean it was boys and girls, but the girls just ignored it probably. But because you will get bullied by little children.
It's not the best way to spread the word of Jesus.
No, he didn't. He definitely didn't get anyone interested in this Christian union.
He tried though.
He did try. Good boy. I hope he's still alive.
You still remember the words. I'm trying to look at me. I'm trying to goad you. Don't do it. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do it.
Word up. It's fresh. Christ has risen up from the dead. I don't remember the rest of it, but it went on for a long time like that. He did put a little. I'll give it credit where credit's due. It wasn't just a rap. He put in little bits of singing in there, but he wasn't in key with his boombox. And I think I'm not really sure I think the music was just the drum beat. Actually, I think it was just like boom, butch, boom,
I love it.
But he still managed to sound like he wasn't in key with just a drum. It was probably the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. This podcast comes out every other Thursday. We don't post about it on social media, so if you would like to tell anybody about it, that would be fantastic. If you would like to contact us, the email address is shamcityroasters@gmail.com, and we will be back with our 5th edition of the Eightfold Path on our 91st edition of this podcast in 2 weeks' time. Have a lovely life.
What up? Bye.
It's fresh. Bye.